Well, we're heading out to the Golden Spike National Historic Site in Utah. It's out by Corinne, Utah. Kind of
way north.
Yeah, way north.
And they're around the Great Summit.
It's not in the sticks, but there are sticks there. Yeah, it's close
rocks
to the sticks and the rocks.
Nowhere.
A lizard too, perhaps. Right. But we're heading out there, and we've come out to take a closer look at the Jupiter and the 119. If you've seen the show that's already on the channel, that was for the May 10th reenactment 2 years ago. Once again, it's May 10th, and we're going back out to the reenactment of the driving of the Golden Spike. But this time we want to look specifically at those two engines.
Right, I've always been puzzled by that.
Well, one of the most puzzling things is trying to figure out what colors they were painted.
All I've ever seen are black and white photos.
Which is all there was.
Yeah,
it
right.
was
So how do you
1860.
tell what color something is from black and white?
And
I know there are ways, but how?
When Chad O'Connor was building them, he didn't have plans or anything, so he based his plans on the photographs by using a micrometer and divining that from the photographs, but he still couldn't figure out the colors. Right. So he just painted them red.
Both of them.
Yeah.
That's where I was puzzled.
Yeah, and so since then, the colors have been changing and evolving as more information comes out about what colors they actually were, but it's subjective.
Right.
Nobody's quite sure what colors they were or what exact shades of those colors they were. So let's take a look at that and look at some of this history and talk to a model railroader who's done some research and is painting his engines a specific set of shades of colors based on the research that he's done.
Right.
The Golden Spike National Historic Site is the location where the Golden Spike was driven on May 10, 1869, completing the nation's first transcontinental railroad. The railroad was built by the Central Pacific building from the west and the Union Pacific building from the east. A big ceremony was held, and it's reenacted on every May 10th now, with full costumes and replicas of the two engines. The original two engines were unfortunately scrapped out many years ago. No one saw any historic value in them. And on the centennial of the driving of the Golden Spike, the idea came up to recreate the engines. Unfortunately, there wasn't time to build two locomotives for that celebration in 1969. So what they did instead was found two old Virginia and Truckee engines and sort of dressed them up to look like the Jupiter and the 119. Subsequently, they decided to actually rebuild the locomotives, and they contracted with O'Connor Engineering, headed by this guy, Chad O'Connor, who actually built camera support systems for motion picture cameras, but he loved steam and he'd been around it forever. So he recreated the engines by reverse engineering the locomotives from photographs, building plans, and then constructing the two replica locomotives. Not knowing the colors, he just painted them red and put gold leaf striping and murals on them, because you can see that in the photographs. The old photographs show quite ornate locomotives, but you can't tell the colors. O'Connor had worked on the first two locomotives for Disneyland. He didn't actually build them, but he was part of the team that helped put together the idea and the plans. But these locomotives did turn out quite nice, didn't they? Now, the fellow here on the right, this is Ward Kimball. He's one of the animators from the Disney studios and quite a rail fan, seen here with fellow rail fan Walt Disney. Ward Kimball and other Disney people were brought in to work on the locomotives. Ward Kimball had his own railroad in his backyard, yes, real full-size locomotives, and he had painted those locomotives, including the fancy mural work on those. He was quite adept at painting Victorian-looking paintings on locomotives, so why not get him to paint the engines at Promontory? He's seen here painting a portrait of Jim Bridger on one side of the sand dome for the 119. No one knew what was on this side of the sand dome. It's still unknown, so Ward Kimball just decided to put Jim Bridger on there. Now, a few years ago, a newspaper article was discovered where a newspaper reporter reported seeing the Jupiter coming out of the paint shops and said it was painted Prussian blue. No one knew exactly what shade of blue he meant by that, but research proved it was actually Royal Scottish blue, but they weren't sure of the exact shade. Now, the assumption is that since these photographs are all black and white from the era, that you can't tell color in them. But that's not 100% accurate. If you look at a lot of these old photographs, they have a peculiar look to them because they were shot on something called Ortho chromatic film that could only see blue and ultraviolet. Also, a lot of them were tinted to make them look a little more pleasant to the eye, but that can easily be stripped out to take them back to a raw black and white to help evaluate colors. Notice that in these photographs, the skies are always pure white. As the film could only see blue and ultraviolet, it couldn't distinguish between clouds and blue sky. They both appear to be white. So the skies always look sort of overcast and cloudless. Everything in the shots that is white, steam for example, will appear to be the same color as the blue sky. Now greens and reds come in much darker than you might think because the film can't see them at all, and so they tend to look almost black, so vegetation gets very, very dark. So in getting back to the engines that were at Promontory, notice that in the original Russell photographs, the headlight can clearly be seen, and it's a particular shade of gray. The engines currently at Promontory are painted in what is assumed to be very accurate colors. The headlight is therefore blue, but we're not sure if it's the exact right shade of blue. But this can be tested. If we apply an orthochromatic scale to the photograph, notice that the blue lights up almost white. The pilot is white, the headlight is white, the sand dome turns white. Yet, in the Russell photographs, this is not what we see. Splitting the screen here between the two, notice that the Russell photograph above shows a much darker gray on the headlight. In fact, it's almost the same shade of gray as on the 119 to the right. So it seems that the blue is a little too light. If it's blue, it must be a darker blue. So we can test for that. Here I've applied a blue scale across the top of the frame with the current color to the left and a much, much darker blue to the right. Now if I apply the orthochromatic scale to it, we can find the shade of gray that's present on the Russell photograph, and it's just above the stack on the 119 here. And that would be this shade of blue right here. Just a little bit darker than what's currently on the engine. So if I tint the engine down, this would seem to be a more accurate shade of the exact same blue. And actually, darn, doesn't it look really, really good on there? And it now matches the Russell photograph, indicating that it's probably much closer to the actual color. And just as in the Russell photograph, both headlights are now a very similar shade of gray. This is Greg Hardy, a Utah model railroader and, as it happens, a fan of pocket watches, and he's been modeling the Jupiter and the 119 in half-inch scale.
The base models were done by Precision Scale, I guess almost 20 years ago now. They were good, but what I've done is through the National Park Service, they've released the blueprints for the locomotives that O'Connor Industries used to build the reproductions. With those and then period photographs, I've begun modifying the locomotives to actually represent what they would have been like on that day in 1869. Based on research, and we'll never know for sure, but the research that's been done, these are as representative of the colors for the locomotives as we can get currently. But then again, every time we do research, someone will point out a little issue that, you know, this color could be different. I know that the current locomotives at Promontory exhibit one series of paint, and these exhibit another series. The darker colors, the green and red on the tender, just depending on who you talk to and what research has been done. The Jupiter, the paint job changes on that as we find new photographs of locomotives from that class that are clearer. This model was produced with the leaf work on the cylinders. That's not on the locomotives at Promontory currently, but photographic evidence supplied us with that information, so we've added those to the model. The paint jobs are representative of the information we had a number of years ago, and then I've modified them according to research on the specific models. For instance, the pilot on the 119 had striping on it, gold striping. That doesn't appear in any of the photographs, so that's been removed. Also, there's a filigree in the cab panel next to the number on both sides. These models were produced without that based on photographic evidence. That's been added as well. Down to the tender, the wine red, the red, and the green, there's still a lot of talk about the layers of the colors. The wine red, most people agree on. The red and the green, people now think those two colors may be reversed, so that you'd have a large green panel and then a bright red insert behind the numbers.
The locomotives at Promontory do have the green on them, but it's incredibly dark. It almost appears black in some lights. Remember, the old Ortho chromatic films did reproduce green as almost black, and this may have thrown people off. One of the major problems in reproducing 19th century locomotives is the original engines had bare metal boiler jackets made of something called Russia iron. It was actually a chemical process, sort of like gun bluing, and yet different. They didn't have paints back then that could withstand heat, and so in order to keep the boiler jackets looking nice, they would cover them with Russia iron. But the people making it kept their formulas very top secret, and they didn't want anybody to know how to reproduce it. And unfortunately, those techniques have been lost to history. In some museums, like here at Sacramento, they've actually used gun bluing on sheet metal, and that looks really good. At Promontory, they've chosen to paint the boiler jackets with metallic car paint.
The actual method for producing Russia iron is still essentially a mystery. The basic mechanics are known. The ability to reproduce it doesn't exist currently. It is produced by hammering layers of chemicals into raw iron and turning it into a hard iron through a matter of heat and pressure. That's done to keep the boilers from rusting. It's beautiful, but it's a way to keep things clean. It wouldn't rust, it wouldn't absorb so much of the soot and the smoke. You could wipe it and keep it clean. They employed specific individuals, usually teenage boys, as engine wipers. And they were hired to take a can of oil, it could be a variety of linseed or whale oil, and they would wipe the locomotives down to keep them clean, particularly the jackets.
As Russia iron was very expensive back in the day, some enterprising people decided to come up with a duplicate process which they called American iron, but it was a little bit different.
The best description that I can come up with for American iron would probably be stovepipe. Old stovepipe.
Now, as Greg is a big pocket watch fan, he has found that the old 19th century watches have American iron springs.
One of the best ways to show you what American iron would have looked like is to show you examples. These are antique pocket watch springs from the mid-19th century, and they are American iron. Here we've got the dark blue. This is more of a medium blue. You get a little bit of green on that. And then the last is a gold. You can see the different colors, so boiler jackets would have been similarly colored. The boiler jackets, I don't know why, but usually the Jupiter is depicted with a darker jacket, and then the 119 is given what would be called a sunny day Russian or Russia iron jacket. The jackets were such that the content of the metal reflected the sky, whatever color it happened to be, whether it was blue or gray, rare cases green. And each section of the jacket also would have its own properties as well. So you'll get a locomotive where their jacket's dark, and then it's light, and then it's dark, and then it's light, just depending on the way the metal is produced.
So here again, the orthochromatic film may be throwing people off. If the boiler jacket was bluer on the 119, that might be what's causing some people to reproduce it as silver. It appears to be much, much lighter on the frame. But in point of fact, it's just a bluer cast. The locomotives still have their original Disney Studios gold leafing and Ward Kimball murals. Bachmann has produced a pair of HO scale and even N scale locomotives, which they feel are fairly accurate. But here again, the colors are probably off a little bit because current research indicates that the silver boiler jacket and light blue are probably a bit wrong. There is a plan to repaint the locomotives at some point to make them more in line with current research.
Oh look, Willard Bay!
Oh no!
Do you know the way to Willard Bay?
Hey, we're good.
Oh, we're good.
Saliva Sisters have got competition.
Look out, Saliva Sisters, here we come. Well, that was a fun day at Promontory. And how fun it was to see the engines and see the reenactment of the Golden Spike and all those just great fun things that one does at Promontory when you
Spend
go out
the whole day out there. It's just fun.
If you're a trained person, if you've never been out there, why? You got to get out there because it's really fascinating, especially on a May 10th. I mean, you can go out there anytime during the summer, and it's going to be fun and interesting.
Right.
But May 10th, it's just so historic to see the
historic.
Recreation on the actual day with the people in the costumes and all of that kind of thing.
Very
It's
historic.
just fun. And how about those engines?
Oh, those are beautiful.
You know, I'll bet when Chad O'Connor built them, he had no idea that after he finished them, they would continue to evolve and become more and more accurate. I mean, he built them to within a quarter of an inch of accurate, but the colors weren't right, the fuel types weren't right. There was a bunch of things that weren't right, that they knew weren't right, or they intentionally did in a different way for a particular reason, or they just didn't know, like the colors, and so they just took a wild guess at it. And over time, it's just gotten more and more and more perfected. And I'll bet over time it gets even more and more perfected. So that's just really, really cool. Well, if you haven't been to the channel or the website for that matter, do pop over to the channel or the website, toymantelevision.com. or just Toyman Television here on YouTube. You can get to the channel by clicking on the blue button, which will be appearing soon. It'll be popping out of the radio. There's the DVD slot, and it comes out of the DVD slot, and I don't even have to hit eject.
I shook it loose hitting the road.
Not just yet, but it'll be coming out just soon. And if you click on the blue button, it'll take you to the channel if you're a subscriber. And if you're not a subscriber, if you click on it,
we'll throw you in Willard Bay.
It'll throw you in Willard Bay. No, if you click on it, you'll subscribe, and it'll take you to the channel. And if you're not a subscriber, then that probably means you haven't seen the other movie on the reenactment from 2 years ago, which is on the channel. About the Golden Spike, the Golden Spike National Historic Site. So you can check that out, all by clicking the blue button, which is appearing now. It's coming out. See it?
Yeah, there.
And there it is, blue button. Well, we're not sure how you found this fun and exciting and informative movie on the internet. We hope you didn't find it boring. And we will see you here again in 1 week with some more massive, massive screwing around. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye.